Slating Channel 2 The People, episode number 22-80, VTR 112480.
New York City subway system. It has turned into a nightmare for the millions who ride it each day. On an average week, over 300 felonies will be committed down here, ranging from robbery to assault, and on occasion, murder. The reason for the crime wave? The city says it doesn't have the money to pay for transit police. Hello, I'm Fred Noriega. This is the 42nd Street and 8th Avenue subway station on the IND line. Your chances of being mugged or assaulted here are better than any other station in the city. Subway riders are scared, and they're more than willing to talk about it.
I don't wear a lot of jewelry. I usually hold my purse really close to me, and I don't carry a lot of money.
We're trying to be very careful, and we are very frightened, especially for the older people. You know, they're trying to do anything. They grab you.
Who grabs you?
The bums. There's plenty of them.
How do you feel when you come into the subways?
A little apprehensive, a little afraid. The unknown, you never know. You come down and you wonder whether you're going to come back out the same way that you went down.
A couple of times, a couple of guys were smoking cigarettes, blowing smoke in my face and whatnot, and I didn't like it. So I told them to put it out and so forth and so on. I had to smack one of them, so forth and so on. And nothing became of it, but it still was a problem.
Protection is non-existent, and I feel that it is really deteriorating, and nobody seems to give it what is happening.
They got me by the leg while I was going up the stairs, and they got a hold of my leg, and I dragged my bag, and they got $70 out of my bag. I had just got paid.
Meet 21-year-old Rocky Pratt. For him, the subway has been a playground. He spent close to 7 years ripping people off down here, and says for him, or any mugger for that matter, the subway traveler is easy pickings.
It was like a game to us, but to me, you know. I mean, we would go down there with the attitude that the police couldn't bust us, nobody could really harass us, you know, any gang that wanted to throw down with us couldn't bother us, and we would do what we wanted on the trains. It would be like our choice, you know, to take anything that we wanted to take.
I'm Marie Torre. This report on the public frustration with subway crime will take me to the offices of Mayor Koch, Transit Police Chief James Meehan, and William McKechnie, who is the union voice for the almost 2,300 transit police officers. I'll be asking the same kind of questions you've been asking. Why is there crime in the subways, and how long is it going to go on before something is done about it?
On this edition of Channel 2 The People, I will talk to victims and muggers, and I'll also be riding with the angels. There are 230 miles of subway running beneath this town, and most of it is considered dangerous and unsafe. This past summer alone, felonies were up nearly 70%, and the reason is obvious. There are just not enough transit police down here. And nobody knows that better than this guy. For 7 years, beginning when he was a mere 13 years old, Rocky Pratt was a rip-off artist.
Everybody says, nah, it ain't never gonna happen to me until it does. You know, big or small, we used to take anybody home. Basically, it was like a game to us. I mean, it's like a playground.
And the average rider is easy pickings for any punk or thief who happens to be operating on the trains.
They advertise all the time. They wear jewelry. It's like an ego trip. People go on ego trips. They wear their expensive clothes, their jewelry. So you know they're gonna have the money too.
Pratt's system was always the same. He and a couple of his buddies would hop on a car and scan the train for police.
Majority of the time, we know where a cop is. If you see him on the station, you know there ain't no cops for at least 10 more stations and stuff. If there's no cop there, we do our thing.
He would then position himself between the last and the next to last car and wait for his victim. In this case, me.
As soon as somebody came walking between the second to last car, he'd accidentally throw my shoulder, and he would bump into me. And as soon as he looked at me, you know, with that surprise look, I would just yoke.
Tommy, is it really unsafe down here for people?
Yeah, very unsafe. And like I said before, people still advertise. They advertise like they want to be ripped off. They're very foolish.
Mike McHale and Bob McGuire have almost 20 years of experience between them as transit cops. Both admit that their police force is losing the battle to the underground enemy. In the past 5 years, over 1,000 transit police have vanished from the platforms due to layoffs and attrition.
Down here, what we basically are patrolmen just on uniform patrol. There's not too many specialized units other than the decoy squads. Everybody on the transit police is actively fighting crime, and if we don't have the number of men, we can't fight crime as well.
I've fallen out on roll calls where there were 10 cops covering the entire Midtown subway system. I've seen less cops working the entire Midtown subway system.
The transit police reported that during the summer months of 1979, approximately 2,388 more felonies were reported than in the same period of 1978. One of those victims was Alicia Flynn, who was ripped off in the middle of the afternoon.
He grabbed my purse, and he continued to pull me down the stairs. And the first thing I did was start screaming. He wouldn't let go, and I was continuing to be dragged down the stairs. And I looked over, and the man in the subway booth was doing nothing, was reacting in no way. And then there was another man in the telephone booth. And this is all very close by.
They can all see you?
They could all see me. I was screaming to the top of my lungs. And I got no reaction from anyone. And I was still at this point holding on to my purse. And this man was still dragging me. And I looked in his eyes, and it said, you know, the next thing is, if you don't let go, you know, I'm going to have to slug you or something. Half the tears I was crying was because nobody responded. It's not like they had to, you know, strike back at the man or anything, but just yell, just let the man startle him, do something, but just not leave it like that, you know.
It's not that over 300 people are hit on an average week. It's that we seem to have surrendered to the criminal.
People are scared, you know. People are scared to take action. You know, they'll see somebody getting jumped or whatever on the train. I've seen it a lot of times. And people will just stare at it, say, I don't want to get involved. You know, they're afraid.
I help anybody that screams. I go to anybody's rescue, you know. It's not that I'd be so strong as to be able to fight off whoever, you know, was attacking, but I'd scream, I'd help them, I'd let them know I was there somehow.
We've made it advantageous for the young punks and for the criminal element in this city to just come wantonly and decide to rip off, beat up, maim, brutalize, rape, assault people at their will, and we idly sit by and virtually never get involved. That's why crime is on the rise. 30, 40 years ago, you'd have never expected a situation like that because the people wouldn't have tolerated it.
You've seen this face before, I'm sure, and this T-shirt, too. They belong to Curtis Lewa and his guardian angels, of which Rocky Pratt is now a member. They have become a kind of security blanket for the intimidated strap hanger.
I want you guys to spread out the same way you normally.
I met Curtis in an angel patrol at one of the city's worst stations, 42nd Street and 8th Avenue. Within a half hour of their arrival, they were needed. A tired old man threw himself in front of a train. A crowd formed and the angels held him back while the police dealt with the tragedy. I noticed that the guardian angels are here. Are they helpful under these circumstances?
In this particular situation, they did assist us in that they held back the people from their morbid curiosity, and also they blocked the scene.
What would have happened if they weren't here?
We would have done it.
But if you weren't here?
They were of some help. That's what you're asking. Yes, in this particular situation, they were.
But Sliwa says the police in the city are hostile towards the angels.
Well, to be very blunt, I think our mere existence points out a lot of the inadequacies of the system itself, both politically, in terms of the officials, and also in terms of the police. We are out here because we have to be, in reality. Survival of our communities, of our peoples. And they object to the fact that we're out here because it does point out that they are not able to deal with the problem.
How safe are the subways?
They're not safe at all. In fact, I advise my own mother and father not to ride the trains. I advise my own loved ones not to take the trains. They are totally unsafe.
The authorities say they will need a 65-cent fare in order to increase the amount of police on duty. Sliwa thinks the 5-cent increase could be forgotten if the people in charge would use a little common sense.
Well, there are a lot of things that they can do that wouldn't cost them a dime, theoretically. Why can they not have a system at night? It reaches a certain point after, rush hour, where they have louver gates, where they can close off entire sections of the station, also down on the platform. Why do they have 8, 10 cars running after 8 o'clock at night? You have people spread out continuously throughout the train. Every train I see late at night after 8 o'clock, you notice broken windows in the back trains. Why? Because the trains are so spread out that there's nobody ever in the back cars. All the troublemakers go back there, vandalism. The city isn't using logic. All this graffiti vandalism problems can be easily solved by closing off massive portions of our unused stations at night and then opening them back up in the morning for rush hour.
Officers McHale and McGuire say the subway itself is indeed part of the problem.
When people come from the street into the subway, they're in a foreign environment. Right away, they're uncomfortable. The layout of the subway, the architecture of the subway is very conducive to criminals because there's a lot of corners, a lot of areas that are, they're not secured.
It almost sounds like if you want to travel, don't travel in the subway.
You have to know what you're doing. And I think with a little education, the people who ride the subway, it's become a person who rides the subway will ride it twice a day, every day, 5 days a week. And to them, they've become acclimated to to the noise and the dirt and the darkness, and they don't think to protect themselves from the criminal, and they have to take an active part in protecting themselves.
Still, most riders seem to be willing to pay the extra nickel.
I'd pay 25 cents more to get more protection and to get cleaner cars and to get better service. This is a disgrace, what's happening here.
Well, if it can be guaranteed that there will be more police protection, okay. But if there's really no guarantee, I don't think they should raise the fare.
Well, the fare has gone up, and I don't see what I'm getting out of it. 5 cents more, and I can be sure I'm going to be protected, sure.
Would you pay 5 cents more on the fare to get more police?
Oh, yeah, sure. Yes, I would.
5-cent increase may be a start toward making our subways a reasonably safe place to be. But until that time comes and more policemen are made available, each rider will continue to ride in fear, on their own, alone.
The perception of people is that there is greater crime in the subways than elsewhere. That is not a true perception of the reality.
To Mayor Koch, subway crime is exaggerated.
If I didn't carry a gun, I would be very skeptical of riding a subway. I have a mother who's a senior citizen who lives in the city, and I am very frightened when she does use the subway.
Transit Police Union head William McKechnie says that if subway crime is not checked, the city could fall apart.
Crime-free is a tall order to begin with. I mean, I don't know, when you talk crime-free, that's probably an impossible order to say crime-free.
Subway crime, like the weather, produces a lot of talk. Nobody's happy with subway conditions. The riders complain that they take their lives in their hands every time they use the subway. The transit police say there just isn't enough of them to make it a safe subway system. And the people in charge feel pressure on all sides to do something, anything, to keep out the hoodlums. How to accomplish this feat? Even the leaders who have gone on the record do not agree on the situation or how to make it better.
But the truth is that the crimes committed in the subway at their high were 350 a week, approximately, and 3.5 million people use the subway every single day during the work week. So statistically, it is infinitesimal. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't be concerned about it, because there is a special fear that comes from being attacked in a subway as opposed to being on the streets of this city or any other city. So I recognize the problem, but it should not be exaggerated as it currently is, because it only frightens people.
I think subway crime is a reality. Unfortunately, the mayor likes to look at the perception of it rather than the actual crime problem.
Meaning?
Well, the city and the administrators of my department are both guilty of the same thing. Rather than addressing the crime problem, they've sought to address the public's perception of crime. My feeling is that the only way to deal with perception of crime is to actually reduce crime. And then the public will perceive the subways as safer. When we can cut the amount of crime in the subways will be actually safe. And I see it as a responsibility of both the administration of the city and the administration of the transit police not to make the public feel safe, but to make them actually safe.
New York City is not the crime city of the United States, nor are our subways. If you go to Detroit, you are much more unsafe than in New York City, or Tucson, because the crimes are greater in 12 other cities in this country. That's no answer. We're trying to deal with it. But when a crime takes place on the subway system of New York, you read about it in Tokyo. Did you know that today, I am sure there were crimes in the Tokyo subway system, but did you read about it in New York? You did not. Anything that happens here is big-time news.
Mr. Mayor, if crime in the subway is not the problem that I think it is, why would you raise the fare 5 cents to help combat crime in the subways?
I'll tell you why. Firstly, I'm not denigrating the fact that people are concerned about crime in the subways, and the crime has to be in some way or other addressed. I'm giving you simply the proportions of it. Between now and December 31, we have agreed to put in over $1 million a month to provide additional patrol strength in the subways. We are already spending, so everybody should know, $106 million in city funds for cops only for the subway system.
Well, if the board and the public sees its way clear to giving a 5 cent or coming up with a 5 cent fare that would be dedicated to security or to transit police officers, and I think that's the sense of what people are talking about, I would certainly feel good about it. It would give us an additional number of police officers, somewhere upwards of 12 to 1,300. And if that were the case, I could assure the public that as long as I'm the chief, that money would be spent only for police officers out on the system, absolutely, and for no other purpose.
In 1975, we had 3,200 police officers. The subways were relatively safe. We didn't see the subways every day in the headlines or on all the TV stations with the heinous crimes that we now see. The subways were relatively safe. We have 2,200 police officers today, 1,000 men we've lost in 5 years. The subways are not safe now. And until we get those police officers back, and believe me, I'm not just speaking as a union official that wants to see these men back. I was hired in 1965 when Mayor Wagner addressed the problem and increased the force from 900 to 3,600 in a period of a year and a half. The subways turned around and they were safe. It's an obligation of this city to make the subways safe again because they're the lifeline of the city. And if the subways don't run, and the people are afraid to use the subways, the city is going to fall apart.
Bob Keating went out
to prevent the subway system from falling apart, Mayor Koch talks about subsidies from the federal and state governments, along with revenue from the proposed 5 cent fare increase. I asked Mayor Koch if it wasn't a case of the subway system needing all the help it can get.
Of course.
Okay, well, why do you feel as you do about the guardian angels, then?
Well, let me tell you the way I feel, because you make it sound pejorative. May I tell you how I feel?
Please.
Bob Keating went out with them. He's the director or coordinator of criminal justice. The vast majority are very young, 13, 14, 15-year-old, and there's some 18, I suppose, maybe above that as well. I don't think I would have the greatest of, sense of good feeling putting the city in the hands of a 13-year-old, right, necessarily. Now, maybe, but I'd have to be convinced about that. He tells me that he was out with them. They generally go in groups of 10 or 12, and that's fine with me. But assuming for a moment we were to confer special status, that they were like auxiliary police of their own nature. You know, that's what they're talking about, a special group like cops, but their own. Well, then we would become liable for their actions. before I place the city behind a group, I want to be sure it's trained. I want to be sure that they carry appropriate identification papers. And I'm willing to work with them. I'm not against them.
I don't have a particular problem with the Guardian Angels. I would like to have a closer relationship with them, and as you probably know, I did meet with Curtis Sliwa and laid out a program which I asked him to consider, and he felt that he wanted to continue working on his own and independently. I would certainly like to have a situation where we would be working closer together.
But why can't you have a closer relationship? What is keeping you and him from having this close relationship?
Well, I think that he has made his position quite clear that he does not want to have the kind of a relationship that we would prefer, which would be that they would operate as a form of an auxiliary of the Transit Police Department, and that we would issue them identity cards and that they would let us know when they'd be working on the system. He feels that that's not the direction in which he wants to go, and therefore that's the reason we aren't working closer.
I think Chief Meehan is yielding to the pressure that is being brought to bear by the media. In fact, in my conversation with Chief Meehan, excuse me, he was quite concerned as to the reports in the editorials, how the editorials depicted the situation. And he was somewhat yielding to it. And I felt that he was, in a way, abdicating his responsibility to the citizens by just yielding to media pressure. The media can say what they want, do what they want. A lot of times they're right. But I think when it comes down to police professionalism, and you have a professional police officer such as Chief Meehan charged with that responsibility, I don't think he should yield to any pressure, no matter where it comes from.
Good or bad, the Guardian Angels are a result of the public concern over subway conditions, a concern that also is causing the city leadership to react, to respond to the public demand for a safe subway system in New York City. One day, when you're not mayor of New York City, do you think you'll use the subways?
You don't need a car in the city of New York, and so when I go back to private life, I don't expect to have a car.
Well, you have a real incentive to get rid of crime in the subways then, don't you?
Well, I do. Even though I expect to be here for a total of 12 years, I will nevertheless keep it as my top priority.
One way to prevent yourself from being mugged is to make sure that you don't make it easier for the mugger. The police department has come out with a list of suggestions to help you. Don't display your money needlessly. Don't stand at the platform edge or at the end of an empty platform. And make sure that your handbag is close to your side.
If you've been drinking, keep out of the underground. Don't sleep on the subway. Carry your wallet in a rear pocket, and don't expose jewelry. Beyond that, good luck. Fred?
For Marie Torre and myself, goodbye. We'll see you next week.